Hello, welcome to Professor Skye's Record Review, the only first listen new music review show hosted by a French professor immediately after leaving the gym. So, as you may be able to tell, I'm going to be reviewing an album by The Who, called Who. And based on this title, which is kind of like a reboot thing, like you know how when they reboot a series, they'll just like name it the same thing, like Halloween is rebooted as Halloween, or like something really simple, I thought this was like a greatest hits album. Even the cover, which I don't have here, but you can check out sometime, it looks like a greatest hits cover, with like images from their past and kind of mod pastiche of different images. So it came out a couple weeks ago and I would have reviewed it, but I just thought, okay, it's just another compilation of Who music. Now I love The Who, as is maybe indicated by this sweet concert poster and the Simpsons toy and all that stuff. But I haven't been keeping up too much on what they've been doing recently, and I'm pretty conflicted. I'd like to talk about this a little bit. I love geniuses. I love artistic geniuses, and I think artistic geniuses should make art always. Even when the quality of their art goes down, there's still enough in there to find something of note. And that spark, that like desire to stay alive and make new things, I think is essential. So this is an almost entirely new album with all new material by The Who. And so in theory, I'm elated, I mean, of course I have to get used to some of the new production and everything, but in theory it should be great. I don't think it is. And I don't review things that I hate. I'm not going to trash this album. I don't love it, and I'm going to talk about why I don't love it in some detail here. But I still think it's necessary to be made. I want Dylan, and I want the Stones. I don't mean that like horrible blues album. I want the Stones writing new music, new Jagger Richards compositions, even if they're on autopilot. Just put them out there. So I applaud the existence of Who by The Who. That being said, here's my review. And this is going to be my 3-word on the thumbnail, I can already tell. There's an old Tom Waits joke, and it goes, there are 3 ages of man. Youth, middle age, and you look good. Meaning, at a certain point, when you get old enough, that's just how people talk to you. Like, they have to tell you that you look good. Despite your age, despite what you've put yourself through, you look good. That's my review of this album, Who. You look good. It's not awesome. It's not amazing. If you haven't like warmed up to some of the like Who Are You or Who by Numbers, 2 albums which take a lot of listens to get into, until you love some of their harder to love albums, don't even listen to this once. But if you're like me and you've gone through a lot of their, all their catalog, at least before Keith Moon died, it's worth a listen. But the ultimate resulting thing is like, it could have been worse. It could have been that terrible blues album that the Rolling Stones released and everybody pretended wasn't terrible. Oh my God, that was the worst. But it's not The Who. That's the thing. I mean, most of the songs are about The Who. Most of the songs are about being in The Who. There's like 5 tracks that are all about how they used to be, how they are now, what it's like to be them, and it's not very relatable. I can't relate to being a multimillionaire in his 70s. But more than that, it's like Pete Townsend is capable, Pete Townsend wrote everything, as he always does. Pete Townsend is capable of writing great personal lyrics about life. Excuse me. I would like to hear what he has to say about being in his 70s. And having Roger Daltrey have to sing what he's saying throws in this kind of weird like machismo element that just doesn't work. And in a way, they're cursed by the fact that Roger Daltrey can still really sing. He really still sounds like Roger Daltrey. He's always been the weakest link of The Who, the most dispensable member, right? But his voice is strong, and he sounds like Roger Daltrey. But I don't know if a 70-year-old Roger Daltrey, or 75, however old he is really what the world needs. I want to hear Pete Townsend's reflections on aging, where he's not talking about how he used to be and how he still hasn't. But anyways, Musically, it's the main issue, okay? And this is true with any of these great acts of the 60s and 70s. I mean, you have a four-person group, and every single member is integral to The Who. Roger Daltrey, I don't like him as much as the rest, but you need his voice. You need John Entwistle's all-over-the-place bass playing. And you absolutely need Keith Moon's crazy drumming. You need the fills everywhere. Like, that's what makes a Who album a Who album. You know, I think a lot about Radiohead. You know, Radiohead is basically just Tom York with a little bit of Greenwood in there. But you need every member of the band to play the way they play in order for that to be Radiohead. That's what makes a great rock band, when every member is indispensable. I said a lot of bad stuff about Coldplay last week. A lot of people didn't like that. To their credit, I think they're like that, even though they might be too pop for my tastes. I'm taking a band that I don't really like as an example that's still like this. So what do when you lose John Entwistle's bass and you lose the drumming and you hire studio musicians? The thing about studio musicians, if you pressed a button and said, "Oi, play like Keith Moon," the guy would just play like Keith Moon. Play like Entwistle, and they play like Entwistle. Like, studio musicians can do anything they want. They're not working with the limitations of that make a lot of great art. So I hate to say there's a soul missing, but it is. It is missing because even when they get Zach Starkey, who's Ringo's son, and in a way, he's not the most proficient drummer, but they have a bunch of different drummers on here, and at times they let the drummer do Keith Moon stuff, and at times they don't. At times let the Entwistle stuff happen, at times they don't. It's too confusing. In the Harry Potter series, speaking of popular English things, the main villain, he divides his soul into little pieces called Horcruxes, and each time it divides his soul. And so the thing about The Who, and Pete Townsend emphasized this on Quadrophenia, is that they're a four-part group. Like, the soul of The Who isn't just Pete Townsend's writing. It really isn't. It's all four things. And so when you lose two of these Horcruxes, you just have this half-man, this gibbly thing that isn't The Who. But, I don't know. It's Townsend and Daltrey. It's still pretty good. Hey, you look good. I was thinking recently, I went to go see Page and Plant when they reunited. It wasn't Led Zeppelin, but they didn't call themselves Led Zeppelin. I would have actually preferred this if they called this Daltrey and Townsend, because that's really what it is. So that's my sort of basic thoughts. To its credit, there's not too much referential stuff, self-referential stuff. A couple quotations from Baba O'Reilly, a quotation of Won't Get Fooled Again. In general, it's mostly original, and you even hear Townsend working with some new sounds and some modern themes. I'll go through it basically track by track, giving you some more ideas. I gotta pick my daughter up from her play soon, so 1 second. No, I'll just keep going with the video. The first track is All This Music Must Fade. And when I heard this, I was like, oh no. Okay, boomer, nightmare. This is like a Clint Eastwood movie, and like a new Clint Eastwood movie. It's all like, I'm old and I'm not PC and you don't like me, but that's okay. He literally says, I'm not diverse. He says, I'm not black, I'm just gray. Pete Townsend, shut up. Okay, it's Roger Daltrey singing, but it's the worst, man. Just stop. Don't sing songs about how no one understands you because you're so old. It's not true. Okay, boomer, knock it off. His song is the worst. It's horrible. Oh my God. Thank God the album gets better than this. In the bridge, it keeps on saying, like, what's yours is mine, and mine is yours, and yours is yours, and mine is mine. And then it just ends with Pete Townsend, as he's singing this over and over again, saying, who gives a fuck? And I said, well, what are you trying to say by this? Do you not care about your own music, Pete? Is that it? You just don't care? You don't care about what you're saying? All this music must fade, when what you're really saying is you're too old and not diverse? I was terrified this was going to be like Brexit, the album. But then it wasn't. That was it. That was the low point of the album, and it was the opening track. The next one, Ball and Chain, I was picturing some lame song about marriage. It ended up being about Guantanamo Bay. I guess I want a political message from Pete Townsend, a super direct political message from The Who. I don't love it. I feel a little too much like, they're sitting there in their mansion looking through the newspaper being like, oh, I still got Guantanamo. My accent's getting worse. But the music is really nice. There's kind of this layered synthesizer, like a looping piano that goes through. Musically, it's some of the most interesting stuff, and a good indicator that they still have something to do. Then the next track is another low point, Don't Want to Get Wise. Another track about how they used to be young and they made money and they still like drugs and they still like having sex, but they don't want to get wise. It's like an unnecessary response to I hope I die before I get old. It's okay, Pete. It's okay that you said that and now you're old. Like when you're young, that's what you think. The whole point was you were expressing a feeling of youth. So you don't have to answer for it. You don't have to have died. Anyways, not great. But then Detour, nice rock track with some claps, beads on a string. That beads on one string. This follows a current in Pete Townshend's music is sort of like mysticism, and I don't love it, but I actually would like to see it developed more. This whole thing is basically this beautiful thematic of like how we're all one and we're all together. I don't know. I don't mind him singing about that. I don't mind them writing about that. Street Song. I happened to be listening to this with my wife, and she just goes, "What is this terrible music?" And I was like, "It's The Who." She's like, "I didn't know The Who made terrible music." And I had to explain to her, like, anyways, she won't watch this video at some point. But it is true. If you're listening to it, hoping to hear Quadrophenia or Who by Numbers, you're not going to get it. This is Daltrey and Townsend in their 70s, and this song is another song about having been young. But then there's an interesting turn with the track I'll Be Back. And I think my two favorite tracks on this album are the least Who-like tracks on the whole thing. They're basically soft rock. And this is the first one. It's like a 70s soft rock. Like while Seals and Crofts or whatever were making music and Who were making Quadrophenia and Who Are You and all this badass music, they've now come back 40 years later and they've made this real tender song. It's this spiritual current that he's on sometimes. He's talking about death and where will he go. And that's what I'm talking about. I want to hear what Pete Townsend thinks about approaching death. That's pretty interesting. A lot more interesting than I'm not diverse, I'm not black. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll get off that one. There's a weird rap part sort of at the end, but it's not too much of a rap part. He puts enough effects on his voice to make it not as bad as that sounds. There's harmonica. There's a lot of great ambition that's shown on this song. And in general, I have to go back to that. Please keep making albums, Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey. Please keep going until you drop. You might produce something 1/10 as good as what you've ever done, and that's something more than nothing. So please keep going, no matter what my wife says. No matter what I'm about to say about the next song, Break the News, which I heard it and I thought was a Mumford & Sons cover, but it's okay. It's another song about being young. It's very kind of milquetoast. I'd say that's the biggest criticism, is that so much of this feels kind of middle of the road. And then there's maybe the best track on the album is called Rockin' in Rage. And this feels like a little bit of a callback to the first song where he's talking about being too old and all this music must fade and saying how he feels alienated and worthless or abandoned or irrelevant. But it's got the second part, which is just great because the drums are mic'd poorly. Like it's like a room mic and the band is just playing together. And that lack of polish made me salivate. I'm like, ooh, I might hear some Who music soon. Because the rest of it's so well produced and published. And of course, if they try to make it sound raw, then you'll end up with that horrible Stones album. But like, still, it's something about the way the drums are mic'd. It just sounds more immediate. It sounds less produced. It sounds more rock and roll. And so they play in some echoes of Won't Get Fooled Again there. So this is nice. I'd say this is actually the highlight of the album. I'm not going to play any of it for you here because I just don't feel like it. I think you get the idea. But have a listen to Rock and Rage. And I'll put a link down below if you want to hear what New Who sounds like. She Rocked My World is the next track. Unlistenable. It's like a Spanish track about a woman who he remembers having sex with. I don't know. A couple times he makes oblique references to like, I made mistakes. I don't know how much you follow Pete Townsend's life. He's made some more than mistakes. I don't know if he's referencing that. Anyways, I'll let that aside. This Gun Will Misfire, another political track. It's nice though, it's got an acoustic guitar. Like, I don't love the political stuff, but it's still good. Got Nothing to Prove Anymore. I hear it and I'm like, oh good, here we go, this is awesome. But it's weird. And then I did just like one set of research, and I realized it's a demo from the 60s of Pete Townsend singing a song. And then they just put a whole bunch of weird like 60s sounding swinging London horns around it. So it's by far the best track on the album because it's taking old stuff from the 60s. And it reminds me of those weird Beatles songs that they released and that Jeff Lynne murdered because Jeff Lynne is a murderous, no-talent hack. Like Free as a Bird and stuff, where they took John Lennon's like core vocals and then just like produced over it. It's like they did that, except Pete Townsend's not dead. What is dead? The Who. The Who is dead. So they took a Who and rejuvenated the Who with this. The last track is called Danny and His Ponies. And again, this is why I think it's important they keep making music, because this is a good track. It's all Pete Townsend, 100% Pete Townsend. 100% Pete Townsend. He recorded everything, drums, bass, singing. And again, it's this nice quality of his voice. The vulnerability of Pete Townsend is what's really needed. I'm afraid Roger Daltrey might just be hindering the whole project because he can sing so strong. We don't want arena fillers. We don't want those anymore. That's not for you. Like, tell us about being old without it being, we used to be young. Because those things I don't want to hear about how you used to be young. One song is like, back when I was 24. Jesus. Ugh. But Danny and His Ponies, great track. This is the second of the soft rock tunes. I think he uses auto-tune. I don't know. What's nice about this is it's kind of an oblique story about something. It's about some boy and his ponies and he's interested. The guy died. I can't quite figure out what it is first listen. But it's some of his best songwriting on the album. And I think part of it is that, like, my favorite Pete Townsend writing is either very personal stuff, like my favorite line of all time. Okay, here's my 3 favorite Pete Townsend lyrics off the top of my head. My cold egg makes me sick first thing. My fried egg makes me sick first thing in the morning, off Quadrophenia. Amazing lyric. What's that line from Substitute? Oh no, my mom thinks I'm a boy, but my mom won't admit it. Okay, those are my top 3. That's only 2. But those kinds of like moments of vulnerability are some of his best. Or things like Tommy or bits like Quadrophenia, which are like sort of stories, and he gets kind of stuck, and even Who Are You and the Lifehouse Project. He gets sort of talking about people in a sort of more general way. And this is in that vein. So there you go. There's my review of Who by The Who. I have to drive to Fairport to pick up my daughter. Again, my suggestion, re-listen to Who Are You and Who by Numbers, great albums, and give this a shot if you already know those really well, because, you look good. All right, there's the camera. Oh, wait. Oh, yes. My third favorite Who lyric, she should have used Odorono off of The Who Sell Out. Very underrated album. I actually got into a fight with a guy at a record store. Not a fight. He's a cool guy. He works at the record archive. And he's British and everything. And we were talking about music, and we were like getting along and all simpatico. And he starts talking about how The Who never made a great album. I was like, I don't know if we could be friends. I mean, I said it as a joke. I hope we do become friends someday. But it's kind of funny. Because I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, all their albums are great albums all the way through. Okay. There's the camera.